Hi, everyone. I'm glad to see this level of interest in this topic. I want to first start by doing some housekeeping business. And I'm going to start by asking you, the audience, some questions, just show of hands. How many of you have never built a mosaic? You're just kind of mosaic curious. Okay. Oh, wow, a number of you. That's great. Okay, how many of you are already designing and building your own mosaics? Okay, few of you. And of those who are making their own mosaics, how many of you are making three-dimensional mosaics? Okay, that's okay. That's good. Okay, all right. So what's going to happen then is, given that people are on a spectrum of where you're at with this, I'll be skipping a few slides, but I'll be, taking my time getting through most of them. I want to first start by having a public service announcement from iLug New York, of which I am a proud member. If you're ever in the New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut area, you feel like talking to other people interested in Lego, please feel free to contact us. You can use the brick-built QR code up there, or you can use either of the other contact methods. So the order of how I'm going to be doing this presentation, introduction and definitions, to make sure we're all on the same page. Number two, we'll be talking about a little bit about inspiration. We'll then be moving pretty quickly into design and some technical considerations, and then wrap up with the conclusion. Okay, now I'm starting with definitions because sometimes the line between what's considered a mosaic and other forms of Lego building can get a little bit fuzzy. And as time has gone on, I think that line's been getting fuzzier, and that's just fine. But the original definition is this: a picture or decorative design made by setting small colored pieces, as of stone or tile, into a surface. Okay, so that's a pretty broad definition, and it has ancient roots. The first mosaics have been discovered from ancient Mesopotamia, current-day Iraq, and continuing on up into our current time with various mosaics that are in subway systems worldwide and elsewhere. I'm going to go real quickly through this. I think most of us know what 2 dimensions versus 3 dimensions is. The reason I have that up there, though, is to remind us that even the flattest of flat tiles have a depth dimension. Okay? All right, the other proviso I want to be clear about is I'm going to be talking today about studs out mosaics. Now, there are studs up mosaics. They share a few more common building techniques with typical Lego, for example, modular building, but they have a lot in common with studs out as well. This is iterative stages of building. There is nothing at all magical about these stages. They're not even necessarily necessary. Okay, so particularly for people who are building the small but mighty mosaics of 4x4, 6x6, 8x8, you might not need stages at all, except to put some Lego pieces out in front of you, put whatever it is you're building on, and just go to work and just let whatever building spirit guide you. Okay? But if you start building somewhat larger ones, like say around 32 studs by 32 studs, you might want to have a plan of action of how to go about doing this so you don't get lost and so that you can purchase things in sort of a systematic way and so on. So, okay, inspiration, what is the source? What image do you want to make? Design, build, and then sometimes even the best planned mosaics don't quite come off as you planned. In fact, I would venture a guess that most of the moderate to larger size mosaics don't. So then what happens? Optional redesign, followed by rebuilding, and then if things get really, really bad, you can throw it out the window. Okay, but hopefully you're not going to defenestrate very much. Okay, inspiration. I don't think I need to tell this group, but I will say it anyway, that really anything can be your source of inspiration. Even something as simple as, I really like the color red, okay? I want to show off, the 15 different ways you can use red, or I've always wanted to see how many curves I can build into a mosaic. Those are sources of inspiration. Portraiture is a source, all kinds of ways. What do you want to show? What do you want to say? Those should be the major questions in your mind, okay? Don't get hung up on too much on content. Do think about what you're trying to do with it, okay? And the one thing is, the image that you build should say something to you, okay? Never mind anybody else who's going to be viewing it. It should be meaningful to you. And especially if you get to a larger build, you're going to want to have that kind of motivation to keep you going, something that sings to you. Okay, and these are just examples from an iLug New York show. That said, given that any kind of content can be conveyed through a mosaic, are there characteristics that maybe make certain images easier to build or others? Well, from my point of view, there's just one word. Okay, what do you think that one word is? This is the one time you can shout out. What? Pixelation, okay. What else? Anybody else? Okay, I think pixelation's a good answer. But what I had in mind was contrast. And contrast meaning the differences between colors, the differences between textures as well. Okay, it just gets to be a little harder to build nuanced kinds of things, but very possible, and you'll see that in a moment. My theory is that the Lego color palette is designed for high degrees of color contrasts. Blue is fairly sliced up, fairly thin, but that's probably the only color that has, a lot of gradations in it, more than, say, 3. Okay, so this illustrates some of the issues that come with contrast. Now, you can probably see that the red of the flower is significantly different than the bluish gray of the sky, of the background. Okay, what happens though, if you decide to use software to plan your mosaic, this is what can happen. Okay, so this is Lego Mosaic Maker, and we'll get back to that in a little while. And as you can see, it did a okay job with the sky, but kind of lost the internals of the flower. This is Lego Art Remix. Okay, did okay with the flower, but kind of lost the sky. Okay, so some of it is design related, trying to get Lego pieces to make the colors you want, and some of it is trying to get the software to show that. So how do you get started, all right? Once you have sort of an image maybe in mind, maybe not even consciously in mind, what do you do then? Well, I would suggest that first you want to think about how dimensional you want to make your mosaic. How much do you want to have it pop out into the space in front of the surface that you're using for your mosaic? And the reason I say that is because that's going to affect a bunch of other kinds of decisions that you make. Okay, it's visually interesting sometimes to have things pop out or not. And any Lego element can be used. Even if you want to make the thing extremely flat, you can use any Lego element to do that. And the key to both of those is clutch power and how you're going to support the various pieces so that they don't fall off, because gravity is not your friend in this. Unlike other kinds of Lego building where you're building on a flat surface and the weight of whatever it is you're building is going to hold everything down, you really can get into having, little bits and pieces falling off like these apples. That can really happen. So just think about it. Okay, so then we get into how are you going to convey detail? Suppose you want to make a really detailed kind of mosaic, lots of little things going on. And, there's a couple of different ways to do this. The traditional rule of thumb has been go large or go home. Okay, so the more detail you have, the larger you make it, the more the viewer can see the details. And that's pretty much the approach I took with this particular mosaic. I wanted it to be about the nature of photography. I basically did one layer except for the lens. The lens is about, about a brick or two high. And I wanted there to be a lot of detail in the hands and the shadows on the hands. So that's how I wound up going large. And by large, I mean 25.2 by 30 inches, right? 80 by 96. Well, that comes with consequences. Every decision has consequences. And so one of the consequences is a mosaic can get kind of flexible. It can start flexing in all kinds of ways. And for example, I built that mosaic on Lego Technic bricks connected by pins, and the pins kind of started moving around a little bit, okay? And the weight of the tiles that I had on it also sort of, bent things. So there was one day as I was coming into a show that it flexed, and lo and behold, there were pieces on the ground of the parking lot that I was in. So that's why you got to think about, size and what are you going to do about it. So what do you do about it? Okay, you can put extra layers of Lego pieces to prevent that kind of inter-brick flexing. Okay, but that will make it a little heavier. You can use the G word. You can use glue. And I know that's verboten here in Lego. Yeah, right. Exactly. Okay? But you can. And you don't even... Bye. You can reinforce it with wood, and I saw that that's what a lot of people had done with the mosaics downstairs. Glue a piece of wood to the back. And when it gets really, really, really large, like 7 foot by 10 foot, then you can start creating struts and other kinds of supports using pipes and other kinds of things. Then, if you don't want to make a large mosaic, and nobody says you have to, okay, how do you convey detail without getting it super large? Well, there's several ways. One is you can add layers, all right? And you can add many, many layers before you get to the point of having to worry about stability in a dimensional sense. Or you can decrease the size of the pieces that you're using. And I'm going to show 2 examples, and they incorporate some of each. So the first example is the Women's Brick Initiative. Has everybody seen that, or are everybody familiar? Okay, and there's a quilt downstairs as well. And so you can see that people have engaged both strategies. There's some layering, there's some use of, if I can find them, 4 by 4, rather quarter round tiles. I'm not find them. Maybe over here. Okay, and this one is by Seattle's own Dave Shevchik. He entered this into the virtual mock submission for this year. It's called Transcendent Shout. And yeah, it is wowie. It really is. And you can see he used quarter tiles, okay, all the way through to convey more information, more detail, in a relatively smaller space. This is 1.5 feet by 2 feet. Okay, so that's a good way to do it. All right, so the third approach is used in sort of more modular type building. Find a way to reduce the distance between studs, and that sometimes goes by the name of diagonal building. There's ways to put studs between the surface studs, and there's many videos and articles on this point, and I recommend going and taking a look at them, if only just for interest's sake. So what do you build the mosaic on? And I'm going to skip through this very quickly, okay? If people have questions about it, I'm happy to go back during the Q&A. Just know that stability is always an issue, no matter what. So, for example, in the Van Gogh Sunflowers set, what the Lego designers decided to do was to create a brick-built framework underneath the plates that are holding the image. Same thing with Technic bricks, but then there are other surfaces you can think about. You can make your own. You can make a Mills plate. Is everybody familiar with what a Mills plate is? Yeah. No. Oh, I think I heard a no. Okay. Basically what you do is you make a sandwich. Okay, you have plates on the bottom, you have a layer of bricks, and then you have another layer of plates on top. And that creates a lot of stability. It also makes it a bit on the heavy side, but I did see somebody using that approach downstairs. If you want, you can take it one step further. You can take Mills plates and put wedges and curved bricks around the perimeter, and then you've got your own shape on top of making your own size. And then, it's a thought to include various Technic bricks in that middle kind of zone or in the undersurface to keep it all light and keep it strong, okay? This sometimes goes by the colloquial name of Technic frames. And as you can see, there's a lot of points of connectivity, but there's also hollows right in that center and right, the little pinholes also. So that's what makes it both strong and lightweight. You're covering area, but you're not adding a whole lot of weight. Okay, and the Rolling Stones, the now retired Rolling Stones set is a good example of all of that. Wedges up here. And the undersurface is built very much with a lot of those Technic frames, various sizes. The one thing I would say to approach with caution, it is definitely feasible, but approach with caution using base plates as the surface to build your mosaic on. It's fine with single layer and lighter elements. I wouldn't try to put a burp on it. It will probably bend almost immediately. And again, it flexes. Other initial design questions, what kind of texture do you want? I don't know if you could see it, but the Rolling Stones set had some studs, some smooth areas, so you can play with that. Do you want the pieces to be uniform or variable? In other words, do you want to do this all with tiles, all with plates, or do you want to, have some slopes and some wedges and some other, kinds of pieces in there? And there's pros to each approach. Pros to the uniform and pros to the variable. Okay, so now you've made a series of decisions. You've kind of figured out what image you want to work on. You've decided how much contrast you may or may not want. You've maybe made a preliminary decision about size, a preliminary decision about uniformity, and so forth. So now what? Okay, you can generate a plan, and you can do that by hand, and there are people who, in fact, market themselves as I only make hand-drawn mosaics, and that's fine. Or you can do it via software, if that's more comfortable, or you can do both. So if you want to create a plan by hand, obviously you can use whatever medium you want. Draw it, paint it, collage it, photographs, whatever. I would suggest you use some sort of grid in doing it so you know where you're at later, so you know physically the location of where you're putting things later on. And the pros of creating a plan by hand is you get complete control over how the thing looks, at least at this stage. And you can create your own savable output. You know, you've created probably a hard copy, and then take a picture of it, and you've got an instant digital version. And if you want to, you can feed that digital version into the software. That will take you maybe a little bit to the next step. Okay. The one cons about hand drawing your own plans for this: you can't post it on Bricklink and expect it to generate a shopping list for you. It just won't. It'll spit it out and give you a lot of nasty error messages. So unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. Okay, so Lego Mosaic Maker, that I've referred to a couple of times along here, it is in fact a set. It is a set with a set amount of plates and set amount of colors and a set amount of base plate. You do not have to buy the Lego Mosaic set, though, in order to use the Mosaic Maker online. Okay, it is its own app built within the Lego website. And it's simple to use, it's easy to access, and it's free if you use it online, but not in the store. Sometimes in the store they require you to buy the set. Okay, so here's an example. Now this is a hard picture for any software or anybody, even sketching it out. Okay, why? Because there's not a lot of contrast here, right? A lot of orange, some subtle shadings in the orange, but that's tough for Lego Mosaic software to see. And so this is what you get. This is not bad in a certain sense. And these are the controls that you're offered through the Lego Mosaic Maker. You can zoom and crop it the way you want, or you can choose the amount of contrast through this slider. Okay? And what it does is it gives you choices about which ones you like within this spectrum of colors. And this is very much just black, a couple of shades of bluish gray, and bright yellow, and that is all. So that can be a positive. Working with a limited palette can help you to focus on the content of what you're doing. As I said, they only give you 1x1 plates. That's what the software is based on. You're just using some 1x1 plates on a 48x48 stud base plate. And I think I've said all the rest. Okay, so the second example of software that I'm giving you today is one that's actually my favorite. And the reason why it's my favorite is because it gives you lots and lots of options, and it's built sort of the way Photoshop is built, okay? It is web-based. It is free to use under all circumstances. It's easy to change the size of the mosaic, but not the overall shape. So in other words, you will still wind up with a rectangle or a square at the end of it. So this is the interface that it gives you. In step one, you're inputting your image, and you're deciding how big you want it to be. And of course, you can go back and forth between all these steps as you go along. Step 2 and 3, in my mind, should be actually reversed. But step 2 is they're giving you sliders to control hue, saturation, and value, brightness, and contrast. Okay, then there's step 3, okay? And step 3 has this very nifty, cool little brush, little paintbrush, and colors to figure out what you want to paint it with. And so you can paint all over this canvas. You can paint out your original image and start from scratch if you want to. And this brush is also a dropper. So in other words, you can take samples of, if you're asking yourself, well, what red is that? I don't recognize that red. You can use the dropper function, and you can also erase with the brush. All right, other things to know, you can decide on your pixel piece through this, all right? And now there's a limited range of choices. It's either 1x1 of various flavors, tile, plates, or bricks, or it's variable, tiles, bricks, or plates, okay? There's no using any other kind of elements. As far as this first draft of a plan is concerned. Then there's quantization. This is sort of the calculations that go on behind the scenes about the colors and how it decides what colors to use. They let you choose how to go about doing that. And then finally, this is output. Okay, so it'll give you a nice little list of the pieces used. You can export that piece list to Bricklink as long as you use uniform elements. In other words, if you decided, okay, I really want to see what this would look like with variable tiles, the output won't make Bricklink happy. Again, you'll get a lot of error messages. But you can use it for just 50 black 1x1 plates, for example. And then it also gives you instructions. Okay, you can output PDF instructions. All right, and this is an example of the front page of the PDF that you can generate with it. As you can see, it breaks it into sections for you. Each page of the output is another section, and that's really handy. Helps really you to keep track of, are you in the upper right-hand corner, are you in the lower left-hand corner, and if you want to jump sections and work on other sections, you can. And it makes it really easy. Downsides to Lego Art Remix. It's not being updated as far as I can tell. There are, therefore, missing colors, such as most of the metallics. It does have pearl gold, but that's pretty much it. It doesn't have warm tan. It doesn't have any color that's come out after about 2-3 years ago. So you have to infer. You have to be able to infer in your own mind if that's something you want to put on your mosaic. And it assumes the use of a 16x16 grid. So remember when I showed you the initial size? Okay, this is always going to be a multiple of 16. And you can't save a digital work file. Okay, so all that nice fiddling around with brightness, contrast, hue, saturation value, quantization, you can't save those. Okay, the output is just what the final product, it thinks what the final product will be looking like, okay? So that brings us to our third example of software, Studio 2.0, right? And within the Studio software package, it has a specific area just for mosaics. It's made by Bricklink, therefore it's always up to date. Whenever I open Studio, it's constantly asking if I want to update it right that moment. You could save working digital files to a local directory, and it will give you all the parameters that you've just created. You're able to control size of the mosaic and image parameters just as you are with Lego Art Remix, but you can't fiddle with the shape. If you want to start fiddling with the shape, then you should probably use the larger part of Studio. Okay, and you can render a model as a JPEG, and of course you can output the shopping list to Bricklink. Cons to Studio. It's a local app, okay? It's not web-based, all right? So if you decide in the middle of the night, you're in the middle of nowhere and you feel like working, you're going to have your laptop with Studio loaded on it right there. And it generates a limited plan. I wouldn't say that all the choices are as wide as I would have expected a Bricklink product to be. And then there are those of us who have a love-hate relationship with Studio. You can guess where I fall on that spectrum, but, but I know a lot of people use Studio very successfully. Okay, so you've made these plans. Is it like following instructions for a Lego set? I see somebody shaking their head no. I'm going to disagree with you, but just for 1 minute, okay? It sort of is at the first pass, okay? When it's a first draft, you're just trying to get it out and in front of you, just like you would with a document, okay? When you write a document, you want to have something to look at and to then refine and play with. Okay? So, but at every other subsequent phase, you may find yourself departing radically or just a little bit from that first draft plan. Because plans don't always work out, right? In all of life, as in making mosaics, plans don't always work out. and especially if you want the mosaic to exist in real life. And that is one difference between mosaics and other kind of Lego building. I've seen a lot of Lego building that's virtual and only exists in the virtual space. I have not seen that quite as much with mosaics. Mosaics, people tend to want to actually build them and then show them in a physical setting. And so, given that, the reality of how a mosaic will look once you actually build it is going to be different than how it looks on your computer screen. It just is, by the nature of how screens are and the nature of the software and so on. So you have to be prepared that you might build. And what I suggest you do when you build is to take photos at various stages. This is a way to get a little distance from your concept. The concept that you have in your mind might turn out to be a bit different from the reality of how it looks once you're starting to build. Okay, so taking a picture helps with that. Showing yourself the mosaic in a mirror also gives you distance to get out of your own head and to look at the image as it's developing. And so does looking at it upside down. Okay, this is something I picked up at various art classes. You look at it upside down and it scrambles your brain a little bit so that you can see where things are not quite working. And then you can choose, if you want, to revise and rebuild it, some or all of it, and possibly redesign it, because if something's not working, maybe you can figure out a different approach to the same image. Or you can take it apart and use the pieces for another mock, because guess what? It's Lego. You can do that if you want to. So that's it. That's the end of my formal presentation. I want to open the floor to questions from both the virtual and the in-person audience. And please come up to the mics, even if it feels uncomfortable, or have the mic handed to you. So does anybody have any thoughts, any questions? Want to share your experience of what mosaic building is like? Oh, go ahead.
I'll ask a question if no one else is going to. What are your thoughts on the fact that it costs a lot more to make a mosaic with plates than it does bricks, even though bricks use 3 times the amount of plastic as plates? What is the deal?
I think you're going to have to ask Lego and Bricklink sellers that question. Maybe it's a question of supply and demand, very simple. But what I can tell you is that round tiles, okay, not flat tiles, round tiles, the 1x1s, you can get them for less than a penny a piece. And in fact, the first time I ordered round tiles, I was really shocked because I was seeing prices like 0.004 or 0.002. And I was thinking, oh, this has to be a mistake. Are you kidding me? But no, that's real. Another question. Yeah, please come up, or do you want the mic brought to you?
So something I found with those little round tiles is they crack.
Oh, they do?
They do.
Okay.
So what do we do about that? Other than you turning the mosaic up and they fall off.
Oh, dear. Okay, so I always travel with a little repair kit. Okay, I bring spare tiles, I bring tools to repair with, but if, let's say you're not traveling, you're just at home and it falls and cracks anyway, well, there's 2 options you have. Either replace it, okay, or use them, right? Instead of quarter tiles, now you have 2 half tiles that you could stick in a space. And you can create some texture that way. Go ahead. There it is, yeah.
All right. Speaking of texture, downstairs along the mosaic line, there's a tiger at the far end near the gates to the bazaar. Yeah. Look closely at the frame, because they've built that with some 8 long, shallow arches on either side, 1 by 1 with the little scrolly bit sticking off of it stacked. And they put a round clear transred 1x1 dot on top of each of those. So you've got 3 different angles that all, as you wander through, are reflecting the light as you move. And it caught my eye more than the mosaic did. I had to go take a look to see that. So paying attention to your frame as well is a way to draw the audience in to look closer at your art.
That's an excellent point. That is. And, folks are probably familiar with the Mona Lisa set. They went full decorated frame with that one.
Hi. I was curious if you'd had any experience using non-Lego-ish software. Like, for instance, I also do crochet and other yarn arts. And I would think that like a cross-stitch maker might give you a better image with custom. That won't help with brick length, but and I was just curious if you had done anything like that before I go, and if you had any tips.
That's a great suggestion. I personally have not, but what I have tried noodling around with is Photoshop. With my background in photography, that's what's somewhat comfortable for me. And it requires a lot of adaptations to get Photoshop to behave and give you a correctly pixelated image, so you can then apply Lego pieces, to it in making your mosaic. But it is feasible. So, good suggestion. Do we have any questions from the virtual audience? No?
We do now. Are there any tips on doing repair to a tiles mosaic when you are trying to repair an area in the middle of the mosaic and you can't get the brick separator in?
Oh, boy. Well, it depends on what you mean by repairs. In other words, you've got a stray tile that's kind of mucking up the design. That is a tough one. I often don't trim my nails before a show because then I can claw it off. But that's probably not what you're looking for.
So I've had to do that before, and I use the tip of a paring knife. Because the dots, they're small and round. And
right.
You can get right into under that. So that's the only thing that I could do. Or the nail file on a little, on your nail clippers. Something small.
Dental tools, yeah, I heard that. Yeah, that is true. That is an advantage of it. And for that matter, of Mills plates, if you do it in kind of a sectional kind of way. Yeah, go ahead. Ooh, somebody's a painter.
I haven't used this on mosaics, but I have palette knives for getting between bricks and separating them just enough so I can get a brick separator in. And Michael's has these in a variety of sizes and shapes, and they're thin and flexible and can get in where your fingernails just can't.
That's a good idea. I have sometimes used a dime. A dime is small and thin enough, and I can slide it in and lever it out.
So I just wanted to speak to the gal when it comes to cross stitch and conversions. There actually are some online people have actually done like DMC floss or loops and thread floss to Lego color conversion charts, so that because of course the flosses come in just really subtle differences, so things have to be kind of grouped together. But there are some, if you do a search online for like embroidery floss to Lego color conversion. You'll probably find some of that.
Let me ask a question at this point. Is anybody here from TLG, from the Lego group? No, too bad. I was gonna, what? I was going to make a pitch for making more shades of colors, please. But anyway, other questions? Any thoughts or any other comments? Anything from the virtual sphere? Okay. Well, that being the case, I'm going to end the formal part of the talk, but you're welcome to come and talk to me after. So thank you. Thank you for listening.